Good evening. This is Pineleaf News, and welcome to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at the latest news in LOTRO, and here at LOTRO Players. And tonight we have with us Etheros,
Hey.
Draculetta,
Greetings, everyone.
Raxwolf,
Hello, Lotro.
and of course, Andang.
Hey, everybody.
And tonight, our big news is that they have released Update 13. But we will start with the executive producer's letter. And Andang, what have you got to say about that?
Well, Pineleaf, I have not very much to say because for our podcast listeners, they will realize that they've actually already listened to our 1 hour plus discussion of the executive producer's letter. And also that if you're watching the YouTube version, there is a link in the description with the long 1 hour plus discussion on the producer's letter there as well. So already we have a longer episode than last week. So thought that was kind of funny. But we will be moving on past this just because we've already covered it. And also, we figured to include it ahead of the episode and not in between or at the end, because we will probably be continuing our discussion through various comments that people left and just in the show in general about the producer's letter as things go on. So we figured that this would be the best way to do it. So that's how we're doing it. So thank you for those who've already listened to it, and for those of you who haven't, hopefully you will. But we're going to go ahead and move on. And there's a new class!
Yeah. Well, it's not out yet.
I couldn't.
It's just,
I never said it was out. I just said there is one. Somewhere in the vault of Turbine, there's a new class.
there is
Somewhere
a new
over
class.
the rainbow.
Yeah, somewhere over the rainbow.
Which really everyone already knew, but they didn't know there was a Bayorning. I'm going to go ahead and drag us back into that conversation, aren't I? You should probably move it on, finally.
Yes, I think we better move it on. Let's talk about the Update 13 quests and Volume 4 details.
I'm going to talk about this, aren't I?
And yes, you are. Yes, you're the one who wrote the article, didn't you?
All right, I'm going to read this dramatically because I worked on this opening paragraph. Yesterday, in the flurry of news, Maid of Lions released a developer diary on the quests of Update 13 and beyond. The article starts by giving interesting facts about Volume 3, now that is coming to a close. So the time spent in real world, 44 months we've been in this volume.
Right.
That is I can't even contemplate. Like, that's a lot of time in just a single volume.
That's longer than I've been playing LOTRO.
Wow. That
Yeah.
actually
by a few
March
months.
2010. When did Free to Play come out?
September something.
That's when I really started playing LOTRO. So technically,
My
the
account is dated June.
serious playing LOTRO, that's longer, even though my account outdates that a little bit. But yeah.
But
Go ahead.
is it? But it says that the endpoint is November 2013. Wouldn't it be April 2014?
Well, if you would do real math and logic, Pineleaf, then you could point out how the dev diary is completely infactual, apparently. Can someone do quick math and figure out
He does
how many
say
actual
the
months it
statistics
is?
are prior to book 14.
Oh, you were right. He did say it was prior to book 14. So when you add
All
book
right,
14,
so that's
then
good.
yes.
Then it was actually even more months. Time spent in Middle Earth, 18 days. That's so funny.
That's how much time travel we do.
Indeed.
Yes. 18 days.
I'm pretty sure
and
it takes longer than 18 days to actually go through all the quests, let alone the actual real world time.
well, yes.
Number of times a rager needs your help, 39.
I'm pretty sure he left off as 0 or 3.
Well, that's just
39,000 sounds
That's just
like-
volume 3, though, not all the others.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
no,
that's
volume
how many
one
times
is-
they need your help, as opposed to the number of times they give you a quest, which is a lot more.
Well, yes. It depends on what you calculate there. Number of times a character's name is an anagram of Gotheron, 1. Number of times that mattered, 0.
0. when he
Interesting story in the dev diary about that, which is worth reading.
yes. So if you read
Indeed.
the full dev diary, you'll hear the reason why he brought that one up.
And the diary gives a brief overview of the end of the volume and quickly moves on to talk about the next volume of the epic. And Maid of Lions gives some of the, we'll call them goals for the new volume.
You're right.
Number 1, no lunch deliveries. Which means that I will have to go out to lunch a lot more, apparently, in this volume, and Mist will be extremely upset because there's no more lunch
And
deliveries in Middle
and
Earth.
Bang,
Yeah?
I think that he was talking about the volume 2 where you had to deliver lunch to dwarves, and that they're
Oh,
not going to have any cases where you do that in this.
bring your logic again, Pine Leaf.
This
All right.
one is actually quite
So-
interesting to me because a few were saying something.
Well, I was going to actually read what their actual statement was, but
Oh, go
by
ahead.
by this point in your development, your character is a hero, and most of the people you encounter will know it. I think there were good reasons to begin Mines of Moria with the possibly infamous lunch deliveries to the dwarves of the Iron Garrison, but Volume 4 is a different creature, and those reasons do not apply. Heroes only.
Yeah. You're going to deliver heroes then.
They've kind of, oh my gosh, they've kind of promised this, like,
Classic.
now you're the hero thing with Rohan and some various other places. Hopefully they mean it this time.
Yeah.
I really do want to be treated like a hero finally. I think that it's the perfect time in our character's development. We're going to Gondor. It's going to get a lot more serious, a lot darker, and I am really excited about that, and I hope that they take it seriously and make it be a hero's quest, because I think that we've adventured through enough trials that it feels like the right time, especially with how Gondor is situated in the world. There shouldn't be that many collection quests because there's so much conflict going on that you don't have time to worry about that kind of stuff.
Ooh.
Well,
My-
there's always
So
barrels
since-
of weapons to carry around, though.
I know.
My thing on this is that, I mean, even as big heroes as we are at this point, I still think there is a merit in. I think I remember Sip's article he wrote a while back about being a hero is also about doing those little small things too.
Yeah.
While I'm okay with them leaving out of the epic because that is like the major thing, and we're going to be fighting major battles, and that's mostly going to be in the epic. I'm okay with them leaving it out of that, but I would still expect them to be in the actual quest content, at least doing those
Oh,
small
yeah.
things, helping
He's
children
talking about
with
the
stuff.
He's talking about the volume here, so
Yeah.
I presume yes, it'll be different for the side quests.
All right. And
Yes.
there are fewer phasing companions. One of the goals of Allies of the King was to give the player a fellowship of NPC companions who would travel from town to town, exploring their relationships and providing a familiar group of characters to interact with at each new region. First the Grey Company, and then later on Horn, Nona, Cordane, and Glewine! I don't think they had that voice in mind when they wrote that message, but anyway, I liked the idea of creating a new fellowship for this stretch of the story. But like the capital letter fellowship, each individual member now has their own path to walk. In Volume 4, the story will have a new direction and structure. What? I don't. What does that even mean?
What, new direction and structure?
I get what they're kind of hinting at, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, because they say
I
they're
guess
going to have
we'll
a
have to
fellowship,
find out.
but they're not going to have a fellowship. Like, it kind of seems like they're saying something without saying anything to me.
Well,
I
it means
think,
that we're not
like-
going to be constantly walking with Nona, Corridon, and Gleowine.
That's what
I
it
mean, if
says,
you-
but it says that they're also going to have, like, their individual paths as well, so I don't know. It's
I think
weird.
that's just flavor text by just saying
Probably.
each character is going to do their own thing. The thing I kind of found with Volume 3 is that we spent a lot of time journeying with other people. I mean, even before we met these people, you're off with the Great Company for a long time. If you look back at Volume 1, spent a lot more time journeying on our own, doing our own thing, like go to other people, but most of the time we are on our own. So I'll be curious to see how they do Volume 4 being different from any of the previous 3.
Yeah, they are saying that it's going to be set apart, and they have to live up to that. It'll be interesting.
We shall see.
All right, and then the final point that I mentioned in the article is a sense of adventure. I want this volume to return to that feeling from the early days of exploring an unfamiliar territory and experiencing unexpected adventures, with iconic threats and dangers lurking around every corner. The epic story will remain soloable, but I hope to add optional challenges and secrets for those who are willing to tackle them.
Awesome.
All right.
I'm
And that,
curious how they expect to create this feeling of iconic threats and dangers around every corner, because haven't they tried to do that with every volume?
I don't remember
Particularly
them
after volume 2?
directly- I don't remember them saying this directly, but obviously I wasn't paying as much attention then as I am now. Honestly, I think Volume 3 is kind of lacking in this a bit. I mean, there are a few things like that. Enna Dwight had a fair amount of these, actually, but when you get into the later Rohan stuff, there's not so much exploring, because it's mostly flat landscape.
Mm.
But, yeah, it kind of died down on that aspect a bit.
That's
So
true.
I'll be looking forward to doing more of that.
I mean, if our theory on the fact that we'll be traveling with Aragorn on the ships is correct, then it'll be interesting to see how they'll have this kind of exploring kind of thing.
well, I don't think Aragorn went to Dol Amroth, though, did he? I think he
No.
went straight to Pelagir, so therefore
No,
he's
he
going to be
didn't,
sending
so-
us off to the side.
Probably, but I'm imagining that how are we going to meet it back up with them then? But I mean,
Via a ship?
we're definitely only going to the places where there's actual stuff going on, which we'll talk about probably later. But in large parts of Gondor, there's not that much going on.
Well, who knows? We don't know how much is going on because they
That's
did
true.
make a point in the book itself that they were getting small numbers of troops from the outlying cities, and presumably is because they had enough fights of their own that they couldn't afford to send out that many troops.
That's
that
reading
was
into it
maybe-
quite a bit, but yeah, maybe.
Can't get away from that producer's letter.
Well, we did already talk about it, so it's like I said, it's going to come into all our conversation. So anyway, finally,
Right.
back to you with the rest of the story. I think that's enough on the.
Right.
This article.
Then let's go into the release notes for Update 13, The Breaking of Isengard. And Etheros, you could take this.
Well, I didn't exactly put a whole lot in this article. I just copied and pasted the things from
Ah.
before because there is pretty much the same as from Aurora.
Well, that seems a little
So-
unfortunate now, doesn't it, Atheros?
Yeah, if you want
Well,
me to read out
alright.
this entire article, I
Well,
will do
no,
it.
we're not going to read the. Okay, I'll give a quick summary then, of course. It included Epic Book 14, which is the conclusion of Volume 3, and we just had the highlights of Volume 3 given to us by Andang, where we spent 4 years in this volume, despite it takes 18 to 20 days, depending on how many days it took them to get from Helm's Deep to Isengard. So therefore, that took quite a while. So therefore, we spent a long time on this one, and soon we'll be starting a new one. And of course, there's a new inventory system. Well, you now can resize your bags however you want and put as many of them. You have a certain number of slots, and you can put them in packs of 5s. And no, they're not going to let you move individual slots from one to the other. So you can have you can have your bags arranged they want. If you want to put everything in one bag, you can. If you wanted to have 6 bags with 10 each, okay.
How would that work, Pine Leaf?
What?
I guess if you had less than all the bags purchased, maybe.
Well, if you had fewer than all the bags, if you had previously 4 bags, which would have been 60 slots, then you could have
Don't you?
10 in
Okay.
each of the 6
I
bags.
guess that works. It's a
Yes.
weird way to do math, though. Anyway,
Yes, it is something that's unlikely that anyone is actually going to do it that way, but you could if you wanted to. And we
well,
have,
here's a question. Do they have it set up now to where if you only have 4 bags purchased, you can use the other 2 slots? Because
oh
on
yeah,
normally before this update, that wasn't the case.
oh yeah, you can use 6 bags no matter how many bags you had in the past.
Okay, well, that's an interesting change.
Yeah, because that's just how you like to arrange things.
Yeah, that's true.
Because now their key item of what you purchased and all that are your number of slots,
Oh, well, I
or
like
that's
these
the
bag
50.
changes even more then. That's nice to add extra customizability for those that don't have quite as much space. I think that's really good.
All right. Now we have 3 regions that have been revamped: the Misty Mountains, including, of course, Goblin Town, the North Downs, and the Troll Shawls. The 3 zones that I believe I've been hearing the most cry, please revamp. Okay, some people have been complaining about Angmar also, but I think these are the 3 that needed the revamp the most, and
So
they did
when
them
do
all
you
together.
think they're going to revamp them again?
What, these 3 again?
Yeah, because I think it needs it, but
Never.
that's for the later conversation.
You'll revamp the revamp. Well, that'll be a while, I think. All right, we have Moore's access to free players, but it costs you in mithril coins in order to go there, and it's a temporary Moore's pass. So therefore, if you want to go to the Moors, make sure you buy it when you want that character to spend their time in the Moors, because it's based on how long you are logged in, and you don't want to waste half your stuff doing creep stuff in the PvE areas.
That's really unfortunate. They should find a way to code,
Right.
I think, to
But
where it's just in the Etmores, but that might be hard to do.
but if you are not planning on playing that character in any PvE areas and just logging out when you're not doing PvP, then this should be fine.
Yep.
So I don't know what is the cost of this. I heard it's an arm and a leg.
It's 100 mytho coins, isn't it, for 6 hours?
That's an arm and a leg.
Yep. But I think it is for those that have been interested for 7 years of how PvP has been and not willing to pay the VIP subscription. I think that this is essentially Turbine's entry drug into the subscription model. And I think that this is how they're going to get, in their mind, I think it's how they're going to get players hooked. Especially considering that Hobbit presents actually drop mithril coins, apparently. So, there's that.
All right. Yeah, well, I know the Hobbit presents drop mythical coins because I've gotten probably half my mythical coins
Yeah,
that
I've
way.
gotten over 200 through just one drop before, which is
Yes.
amazing.
So very well. And there are resource instances, level 95 resource instances, of course, one for each of the 3 main resource types. I have done the one for the prospecting, and I've done the one for the wood. I've not yet done the one for the scholars.
Fredulous from the chat corrected, it's actually 20 mithril coins for 6 hours, which is
Okay.
a lot more reasonable.
Okay, 20. Okay, yeah, that's certainly a lot better.
And I would like to point out something that we kind of skipped over, which was that the free peoples may now enter the Etmores at level 20 and have their characters scaled up to level cap, which I think is the biggest change they've made to the Moors in a long time.
It's probably also worth mentioning that if you do that, you're about as effective as a rank 0 creep is against a ranked freep.
Even at level
Not at all.
85, it's still very hard. You'd kind of need to be 95 in order to be going in there. But for those that want to play with their friends in the Moors, this is fantastic. Or if you want to level up an alt just in the Moors with your friends in a group, this is a great option. And if you know how to use a low-level character as bait, then you can be really effective, I think.
And for me, I think this is a good step towards making the Moors as separated from PvE as possible.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd want it more so that you can go in the malls whatever level you want and stay in there and be as potent there as you would be if you went and say did a bunch of PvE and then go into PvP and played there.
Yeah. And it also mentions that they are scaled up. I'm wondering, this is the second system to get this auto scale to 95 or whatever cap is. Do you think
Right,
that we'll
because
see any other systems that get the auto scaling in the time of LOTRO that are already existing?
I don't think there's really anywhere else where it could be used.
Yeah, without reversing stuff like having skirmishes work backwards or something like that. I mean, for locked-in level instances, I could see this coming in handy.
well,
But
the trouble with doing it with skirmish, well, locked in instances, story wise, I know sometimes story wise is blown anyway, but
like
story
Storm and
wise, it when it
Methodius.
makes sense to do them until you reach the appropriate level.
Right, but let's say you make them at 95, so you scale them all up to cap or whatever cap is, or a few of them up to cap even, and then say, all right, now you can do it from any level from 40 to there, because the Etmors you have to be level 20. So
Well, the trouble with that is that many of them give certain things that in challenge ratings, and you're not going to. And doing challenge at level cap usually gives a special prize. And
hmm.
I know that what they're doing in epic battles is that you have to be 95, really 95, to get the platinum drop or something like that. So that
Hmm.
may throw a few wrinkles into the matter.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to see if they do expand that system to anywhere else now that they have it working with two different things.
All right. Then we also have a mail update. And in this case, we have that if you're VIP, you can use your mail by clicking an icon rather than going to a mailbox. You can attach up to 10 items,
Yeah.
or 10 items or stacks, I should say, in it.
Mhm.
So you could send quite a bit more in mail than you used to do. And in game mail is now sent to you by players on your ignore list and that will now be returned. I had always assumed that it did that anyway, but I guess and that there's certain items purchased from the Loto store that could be emailed to others for a small Mithril coin fee. Note that if it's one of your own characters on the same account, you will not be charged the Mithril coins. It's only if you send it to a character from another account where it will charge you Mithril coins.
Yep.
Yes. And then, of course, they were doing some balancing, of course. And what do you think about the adjustments to the balance?
That's a topic for later on, really.
Yeah, we have a
Okay.
question about that.
Okay, we have a question. All right, then we'll go on to there's some updates to the character models, which
Is a
inev-
kettlefish.
yes, there's always whenever they make the slightest adjustment to the character models, there's always someone who's going to complain about it.
I like them. Do more.
Yeah, I like them too.
Yeah, if anything,
Speaking
I
from a
don't
male
think
elf perspective.
that they're big enough changes to really impact that much. I know some people will probably have issues with them, but honestly, there haven't. It's not that big of a change. It's really just posture changes and a few other things.
Right. And then now they were originally planning some other changes, but they got some feedback, let's say some very loud feedback during the Bulwar run, and they, let's say, rolled back a few of those changes. And we have first age items, or more likely the first age crafting ingredient that you need, the symbol of Kilimimbror, whichever level they're on, like flawed. Yes, the flawed first stage symbol.
Could I ask a question about the
Yes.
cries? On the last topic, the folks on this call that were on Bull Roar, were they really as bad as everybody seemed to indicate?
Well, it sounded rather weird to me when I was on there during the first round.
The character models.
No, they're talking about the sounds that characters made in
Oh,
The
combat.
racial calls, yeah.
I never heard them because my lawmaster just didn't make any of those sounds.
Yeah,
But from what I saw people saying, they liked the concept. It's that the voices themselves were not good, and that
Okay.
even the like Rowan himself said that they were placeholders, and
Oh.
if they approach it in the future, they will obviously have proper ones.
Yeah, because it does seem like a neat idea.
yeah, having
Hmm.
one, especially since they said that it was that it was supposed to vary not only based on your race but based on your region, which is something they haven't done differently. Making any significant differences based on where you
Right.
come from in the past.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to having those kind of racial calls, assuming the
Right.
voice is not irritating, of course.
Assuming
Right.
that the voice is not the same voice actor as the Ent guy. Pine Leaf, I don't need your help here either, okay? It's bad enough in the game.
As long as they all sound like Gleowine.
Nope, not going into that trap. Nope.
Yeah. All right. And now they also decided to take out or actually added checkboxes so that you could turn off many of the confirmation
Thank
checkboxes.
goodness.
Yes, because some of them were just annoying.
I noticed this when changing my class specs. Has anyone done much with allies
Yes,
recently to notice
I
this?
noticed. Well, I haven't noticed allies, but I did notice class specs. That's a good change.
Yeah, so that because yeah, getting it annoying when every time you want to change class specs was
Mhm.
all right.
Hmm.
So therefore, some of them I left on, some of them I turned off
Mhm.
because and I'm sure different people have their own
Is
opinions of which one should be left off.
is there a way to turn them back on?
I would assume from the options menu, but I
I,
have no
I would
idea.
hope there'd be something in the
Because
options
that
menu
could be
there.
an
Oh yeah,
issue.
actually, in the patch notes it says that there's a button in the UI settings to
Okay,
reset.
that's good. That's a really good
All
change.
Helps to read the thing you actually paste.
Yeah, it does. Oh, this is literally sitting right in front of the right in front of me on the feed. So now I seem really dumb.
All right. Any other comments about update 13 then?
Well, I think that it'd be good to go around the horn and give our various first impressions of Update 13. And we will be doing the review episode on May the 10th for Update 13. So a little ways away, but we want to make sure everyone has time to get in there and enjoy the revamps and things like that before we spoil everything. So there's that. And we also need time to formulate our opinions.
Very well.
So,
So who's
if
first?
let's Brax, you brought it up. Why don't you go first?
Oh, dang it.
Never fails.
I will say, and I've only played a few times this week because it's been really busy. But my first impressions are that I love the flooded Isengard area, which goes along with my history, I guess, of loving devastation in the game for some reason. Um, I did make it into Fangorn, and I'm not as impressed, but it's not as that forest wooded area is not as bad as Balewood was for me, which I didn't like at all. But yeah, I without giving too many spoilers, I really liked where the epic went, and was very. I mean, I actually was kind of giddy a couple times to see some of the folks that they brought back in to participate in the wrapping the epic up
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
those are my first impressions. I like the epic, I like the story, and I like the flooded Isengard area. Not quite as impressed with the wooded area.
All right. Pine Leaf.
All right. I really liked the epic story. I had a great deal of fun with. I've completed it 4 times already, 4 different characters
Of course you have.
have gone through it. I'm going through the wood area. That is, it just said it's not exactly the most exciting area in the game. but we are getting there to trying to see what we could do in order to clean things up, so to speak, and everything's. It is interesting the resource instances, at least the two I've done, and I heard some people say that they really liked what happened with the scholar one also. So the resource instances seem to be a little bit better in their style than the previous ones, the ones that were done for Moria and the ones that were done for Hutbald. So that's good. Let's see what other any other interesting changes to note. Oh yeah, I'm doing the revamps. I've been going through the North Downs and through the Misty Mountains, and I'd say that they seem to be do a decent job with. I know some people wish that they've gone further, but there's only so much you could do at a time.
Yeah.
And I think that covers
All right.
my impressions.
It looks like Fredilus's first impressions are I love the artwork as usual. Flooded Isengard feels a little unused though. It's such a huge area, but we spend about an hour there, and then never really need to see it again. I generally agree with that.
Yeah, but there isn't much that you can do with it, seeing how it's where it's the main base that has just been taken over by, from the orcs' point of view, the enemy. So
Pineleaf, did you not see all that stuff there? We need to be the cleanup crew. Do you remember that premium real estate of Isengard back in that flashback? That's what it needs to look like. That's where Heightbold should have been this time around. Rebuild
well, first you
Isengard.
gotta wait for the flood, but it'll take a while for the flood to recede. You can't start
Well, you have
rebuilding
to
it, regreening until the flood recedes, and
break
by
down a
that time
couple
the ring
more
will be destroyed.
walls. Break down a couple more walls, Start some irrigation going, get some farming going, and whatever orcs are still around, let them do some community farming.
Something that I kind of felt in the beta, and it's not so much after doing the epic, but still a bit, is that it kind of felt empty to me. I mean, like just from reading the books, I figured that there are at least Ents around standing watch and all that
Yeah.
stuff. You don't actually see any though. I'm wondering, like, whether that's maybe I didn't remember from the books right, or if they just.
Yeah, I'm thinking I didn't remember right because I know that they do look over lore very meticulously, but maybe they got that overlooked a little bit. I don't know. It's kind of strange. Airlog Muscle Gut says the convenience updates are great. The new content seems sort of meh. I really wish there was a quicker way to get to Fangorn. The horn on the hill is a little out of the way. That says a
And
lot.
hard to find.
And hard to find.
In fairness, probably the quickest way now would probably be up from Woodhurst.
Yeah.
If you head past the mead hall there, you can take a path straight to the Entwood. That's probably the quickest way now.
Yeah. And Frellis continues on saying, I dislike Turbine adding the new daily things to keep track of in the Entwood. Do I really need to keep track of 2 to 3 separate timers for a daily stuff?
I'm not sure if anyone else here has done the dailies much, but I don't mind the concept. It's just the way they did it is very weird.
Yeah,
it's
it
like
seemed that way.
They give you a quest, and then you go around and sometimes get other quests in different areas, and sometimes you don't. And then there's the quests where you do for the horn pets, which is a different thing from the other quest you're doing. And then there's one where you have a horn following you who gives you quests for a different type of places you go to around. It's just very confusing, and the way the map shows the quests, whether or not you've actually done them.
Oh, the way the map.
Yeah,
shows the
it's
quest.
unnecessarily complicated for sure.
Yes, it is. And I actually like the quests themselves. It's just the way it's laid out is very odd and confusing.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, Ents just don't think like humans.
Yeah, Terradwin says that I did take a lower level character through the revamped North Downs. Pretty happy with those changes, so it seems like that he really likes the changes of the North Downs. Pineleaf, you went through the North Downs a little bit. What did you think of that?
I liked what I saw in there. It seems to be more logically laid out, and you no longer have the continual frustration of doing three quests in a chain, getting ready to do the final one of the chain, and it says, "This is a group quest.
That's nice.
If you are
Oh,
doing by
that's
yourself, too bad." Oh, by the way, the
oh,
rest of the zone is going to be a solo quest that requires this quest to be done.
oh, such
that's
fury about those quests,
that's
especially when I get invested in the story, like Min Chan's uh, storyline, which I apparently has been removed in this revamp, but I digress. That one especially, I was trying to do so much because I cared about the story in that one, and I couldn't do it because the last quest was a fellowship one.
yeah.
God, that really annoyed me.
That's a really nice change. I'm glad to hear that, Pineleaf. Atheros, have you voiced your
Okay.
opinions on the changes yet? Or on update 13, rather?
Well, the epic, I believe a couple of us mentioned, is just top notch. Every second of it, even if there aren't that many seconds in it, is it's very well done. Probably the best book in terms of quality they've done in a long time, even as good as the previous ones were.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely very good. There were a couple of moments that I did find quite touching, and the rewards at the end were good, and some of those were quite poignant too, even if there's certain things that people would like to mention.
Oh, we'll get to that in mind.
I'm sure. As we were talking about the Entwood daily. Well, actually, I must say the landscape. Flooded Isengard is, of course, flooded. So, as you'd expect, there isn't a whole lot they could do with it in that sense because the old they had to use the old Isengard, which was done way back at 75, and they've learned a lot about their engine, presumably how to work with it since then.
Mhm.
But even so, it looks very nice, and
All right. Well, it looks like that we lost Atheros, so that's fun. Yay! All right. Well, I will go ahead and give my impressions. Which are basically that I really liked the new area. It's the forest area is pretty neat. The landscape design is great. I don't think that they took advantage of, from a quest point of view, what they could have done there. They were focused on doing Heightwold there, and I think that that is a big mistake. I think that they should have done something else aside from having Heightwold be in that forest area. I think that it was a terrible idea. I think that they should have done something entirely different there. Actually have quests and stuff there instead of creating all these not so interesting quests there. I think was a
hijacked
mistake.
my section.
Huh?
You hijacked my section.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Because of the call breakup, I'm going to go ahead and continue the rest of my impressions, if that's okay, and then we'll come back to you with Elros.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. It's fine.
All right. And the epic story was fantastic, beyond what I expected by far, and I had fairly good anticipations for this, but I also wasn't sure because I knew the ending of Volume 2, and it had a good ending, but not as good as Volume 1, obviously. I don't know where I'd rate this one yet. I'd still kind of getting over the hype of just finishing it, but it was a really good ending to Volume 3.
At least you don't have a quest that makes you go around every zone killing a goblin in there.
Yeah, but Pineleaf, if you get to kill him with your spear, then that fulfills one of your all-time wishes. All right. The quest rewards for the epic were really good, I thought. Really weird at the same time, though, because that ranger does not need a full-size statue of himself under any circumstance. I'm sorry. It's weird.
Oh well.
It's very
Your
weird.
opinion is noted.
The portrait they gave you actually was, I thought, was a nice callback to Volume 1, where they give you a portrait of Anomalith. Actually,
Yeah,
Right.
I
yeah,
think
that was really cool. I think the fact though that, like, how did the ranger come across this statue? Did he like find a tree and say, "Oh, well, we're going to be an Isengard for a day. I might as well carve a full, intricate, life-size statue of myself while we're waiting."
Well, he did do it of himself.
Well, somebody did it of him.
I'm guessing the remaining Rangers did, however few of them are left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibly with the stuff left from Isengard.
uh, sorry, buddy. Your int friend died. Do you mind if we use him for a statue of our ranger to give to this guy so he can put it in his house?
Oh boy.
But in all seriousness, the rewards were good. I, from what I've experienced, aside from maybe the difficulty in light classes, which we'll get to later, I don't really see that much that's wrong with this update. I might be missing something. There could be something majorly wrong. I don't know, but I haven't found anything.
Well, I did find one bug, but
What bug did you find, finally?
it was that in the revamped Isengard broke the one of the quests in the earlier epic story where you're in Isengard.
Okay.
And that there's a door that sends you to the wrong place when you exit through it.
Didn't you also mention there were some graphical issues as well?
Yeah, I think it's related to that because
Okay.
I think they're getting their versions of Isengard mixed up.
It sounded like it. Which is weird because they're not in the same spot, so I don't know how they could get them mixed up.
Do we know of anyone else who's had this issue?
The first I heard of it was Pineleaf when he mentioned it on LOTRO Players Adventures today. So
Yeah, I don't know if anyone. Yes, I don't know if how many people are doing that part of the epic story since the release was made. Since that is, while you do that usually right after finishing the Gravenwood, which is very different from. And most people going into Isengard, of course, were probably going in there during the time of after finishing up in the rest of Dunland, or maybe going back in there with the flooded version. Because you're only in there briefly, since it is a public instance rather than a regular quest area.
Some
Yeah.
developer reused the wrong variable name.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
probably. Athalos, if you want to finish up your thought on it. And invite
I
Drac.
can't remember where I was.
I don't remember, but it was something. I think you're just getting ready to the rewards or something like that. Maybe it was after
yeah,
that.
the rewards. I think I just finished the rewards. Yeah, the landscape I was talking about. The Flood Isengard they couldn't obviously do much with because the way it was. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I finished that part. The Entwood, a few people saying they kind of not so impressed by. I think it's kind of because it is very visually similar to the Eves of Fangorn, and they do flow right into each other now. Like there's no direct line there.
Well, I actually loved the landscape design. It was everything else about it that I didn't like.
Yeah, I know. I mean, some people have said that it's kind of less, oh wow, this is amazing kind of thing. I think the major lore is, or certain parts of it, Durndingle, which is the Entmoot area, is nice. You know, just greenfield and all that. The can't remember Treebeard's name. Treebeard's house's name. That place is really nice, actually. Lead up to it and all that stuff. Really nice location to be in. The questing, like I was saying earlier, I don't mind dailies. I don't even mind Highbold, aside from how long it took. It's just the way they laid it out is very confusing and odd, and I didn't really like that part much at all. It just wasn't well created in that sense. I would have liked actually for them to have made a bit of story there first, like have a fairly short or long quest line, and then when that's done, then you go into the daily stuff. But it's
Yeah.
not really like that. It's kind of you just do a couple of quests and then you go straight into daily things that it's like, okay, we need to help, let's do it, and that's it.
Yeah, it really makes me feel like it was a total waste of a zone because honestly, you really just have the only thing story from this zone is really the flashbacks, to be honest. There's not that much else that's there. So I wonder if they actually needed the zone at all. As far as an actual zone, as opposed to just a place where they had the instant stuff, kind of like when they went to Gondor back when and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have minded even if they didn't have the daily stuff. I would still have gone to this region anyway, just for the sake of
Well,
where it
yeah,
is
I
and
would have gone
having
to
a
it,
look
but
through.
as far as like, they had to spend resources to flush this area out and do stuff like that. Was that worth their time?
I'd think so. In the end of the day,
Okay,
this is still a Lord of the Rings game, and this is a fairly significant lore
that's true.
location. So I think it was well worth doing.
Okay. Well, Drac did drop call, even though he was hosting the call, so that's kind of weird how that works. But we're going to go ahead and skip over him so he will give his impressions when it's time for the review. Does anyone have any final thoughts before Pineleaf continues on to the next thing? All right. Well, I think we had a good discussion over our first few ideas, so I think that that went fairly well. Are we back now? Alright, well, we are going to be switching over to our TeamSpeak server, so bear with us a little bit. And Skype is just being obnoxious today. So you can thank Skype for the delay of this show. So thank so much to Skype. And Athelros says that Skype should be dropped into the fiery pits of Mordor in the chat there. That probably is true. They should be going to the fiery pits of Mordor, as Athelros points out. So maybe that will happen. Who knows? But
All
anyway, I
right.
think that we're back here. So finally, if you want to take the show back over and go on to the store sales.
All right, we'll go to the store sales and what we have for this week. All right, let me be arranging all this. All right, we now have this week the free sample of the week is a relic removal scroll times 1. Use coupon code SAVE65, SAVE65, 1 per account. In addition to this, we do have a loot box weekend this week from April 15th through the 20th. So you'll be getting extra loot boxes and presumably keys.
Yay.
Oh, should I answer that?
Huh?
Someone's calling me.
Don't answer that. Just continue the show.
Okay, all right, here we go. Now we have a 20% off of milestone skills. Hurry.
You should probably exit out of Skype, finally.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, well,
I'll
problem
take care
is.
of it. Don't worry.
All right, here we go. We have 20% off of milestone skills, hurried and returning traveler, riding traits, and simple rally horn. In other words, if it in some way relates to travel, it is currently on sale.
Indeed. That's basically what's going on.
That's basically what's going on. All right, and now for our news for LOTRO players, where we'll begin with CSTM's 2014 Festival Guide. Yes, even though Casual Stroll to Mordor is, or I guess it's now Casual Stroll through MMOs.
Yep.
So even though they're no longer the main news site, they do still put out their festival guides. So therefore, they put out their anniversary celebration guide for this year. So we know what the latest news is, what's changed this year, in addition to what items are currently available within the group. So not much has changed this year that I've noticed that was noted in their article. Just mainly that, as usual, adding a new horse and a new cosmetic here and there.
Yep,
Has
and
anyone actually participated yet?
no, I haven't. But as always, this guide is obnoxiously thorough. So big thanks to Golden Star for doing that. That's just awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Golden Star, for your work on this as usual. For all these years you have been doing our guide.
Well, not our guide, but a great guide. Everyone in the community looks at this guide, and
Right, that's why it's our guide, because the entire community looks at
indeed, and she does a
it.
fantastic job. So once again, a big thanks to her.
Very well. And our Lotro video highlights in Love in Middle Earth. What's that all about, Andang?
Well, this is a video that basically it's a married couple, not American Golden Star. Believe it or not, there are other married couples. It's from Luna the Berg's YouTube channel, and it does a fantastic job, and it gives a clear idea of what it might be like to be married and in Middle Earth. Or at least in love and in Middle Earth. It's amazing, and I highly recommend everyone go check it out. And it's to an interesting, well, not really interesting song, but it's to a good song from the time it was in. So there you go.
All right. Then next we'll have our Lotro Players Adventures episode 11, Frigid Fight in Forkel.
This was an interesting episode, to say the least. We had some issues. Basically, some icy crevasse went not so well.
Well, when does Icy Crevasse ever go well?
When you're
Okay, I
not
have
doing
had
it.
a good few. Okay, I have had good Icy Crevasse runs. I should take that back. Yes. Does occasionally go well when in a pug though, it doesn't work too well in a pug. You have to have people that are used to working together and know what their roles are in order to do it well. And let's face it, when does Lotra Players Adventures does anyone know what their role is?
Remember that first episode? That's the closest we'll get to knowing what our role was.
Oh boy. Yes, first episode.
I think I'm a healer or something. Have healing skill. Don't know whether.
You're cutting in or out of Thelros. You might need to switch to push to talk.
All right, and on Athros, did you have something to say, or?
He cut out, so we'll let him switch over
Okay.
to push to talk and keep going.
All right, very well. We'll go into Lotro outfits. The Archer of Mirkwood. This is another one in our video series showing various outfits that would be nice. In this case, we have an archer, and it does show him actually firing arrows in it, and nice dark outfit, and throwing it all through Mirkwood, or actually, in various places it looks like.
Yep, and as always, it's by Sithrith, and she does a fantastic job keeping up video production quality. She does a great job with her videos, and so definitely recommend
Right.
looking
So
through
if you
that.
want to have a nice look at another outfit, then head on to her series. Last week we had one in Evendem, I believe, and this week we have an archer. Next, day on the green fields.
Yep, this
It sounds like
is the event by Lilicate.
yes, by Bu Shipu, or what's the best way of pronouncing that?
I have no idea.
Oh, Le Beau Chapeau or something. I can't speak French, so.
Yeah, I have
But
no
it was,
idea.
yes. And it's telling us about the concert that they'll be doing. They on the day one on Saturday the 19th. Day two is Sunday, which would be the 20th. So if you're listening to us live, you can still have time to see this. And there's quite a grand show that's here. It's Day on the Green Fields, an all-day music festival to be held on the Legible server. So this is not exactly a big a deal as Weatherstock, but it's larger than Weatherstock in how many bands are there and what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a fantastic event. I'm really
Yeah,
excited for it.
and it looks like it's constant. It started on noon Saturday, April 19th, and goes on until 11:30 Sunday. So that's a day and a half of music.
Yeah, and that is the 20th on Sunday. So if you're listening to the podcast, sadly, it's too late. But it does look
Uh,
like it's going to Twitch. I don't know if it's archived there or not, but there is a link to Twitch in this article.
Very well. Now Brax had his pick for the week, and fortunately he is not here at the moment. And Brax chose the Hobbit's Journey, a new LOTRO blog at a hobbitsjourney.com. The hobbitsjourney.com. And what did you have anything to say about that, Endang? Or even Ethros if you're back?
Um,
Um,
Go ahead, Atharos.
I don't know what we were meant to be saying.
Talking about the Brax's pick of the week, A Hobbit's Journey.
Um, Bearing in mind prior events, it's probably better I don't touch Brax's pick of the week again. So why don't you take it?
Well, thank you for that pass there, Atharos. That's fantastic. Really. It's just amazing. Yeah, this is a new blog on Middle Earth Network. It's by LOTRO, and he does a great job. Basically, he's going to be going through the journey of Middle Earth, talking about various things inside LOTRO and his journey through the game and through Middle Earth. It looks like a fantastic website, well designed. He has several categories already on here, including a monthly newsletter that he's looking at putting out. So he has a very ambitious goal. We hope him the best. As always, it's great when there's new websites coming out for LOTRO. This last few weeks, there's been a lot of new websites, new people applying to come join LOTRO players, all sorts of things going on in the community. So something seems to be going right, and I'm guessing that it's update 13. So it looks looking good.
Now, my question is it Logro or is it Eogro?
That's a good question. No idea.
Because it looks like an I to me rather than an L, considering that
It
it's a
is.
name.
It could be an I.
So it's either Eogro or Logro, depending on how you read that. I'm sure that maybe somewhere he will clarify that.
Either way, I recommend going to hobbitsjourney.com and checking out the site because it's great.
Oh, here it is. At the bottom, he has a name that's all in lowercase. Eogro Mary Belly.
All right.
Very well. Eogro then.
Thank you kindly.
And now for our question of the week. Etheros.
Goddamn technical issues. It's going to make this discussion rather difficult now because I've already had a lengthy discussion about this with Andang, and Panif tends to go with the flow.
Yes, that does
It's going to
make
kind
things
of
rather...
limit how much we can talk about it.
And Draculetta
I'll-
seems not to be able to get back on.
Nope.
If you see him on Steam, if you could send him a message, I don't know what's going on. I don't think
he's already said his net is just.
Yeah, his net has been flaky the last couple of days.
Okay then. Well, I guess it's just
So
us.
I
So go ahead,
guess.
Ataros.
All right. The topic of this week is rather appropriately considering the update, just the concept of difficulty in LOTRO. It's been a pretty hot button topic of the last, I'd say, year. Really since Rise of Rohan release, where things started to get really easy. And then Helm's Deep just kind of threw it right overboard, and then Update 13 has kind of gone back a fair amount, actually. So, the first question I have here is just a general. How do you feel about the current difficulty of LOTRO with Update 13? The different aspects of it, so landscape, quest content, skirmishes, instances, epic battles, all that sort of stuff. What do you think about it in the various aspects? Andang.
On the classes that I've played, so this is not including what I've heard from light classes and various things like that. On the classes that I've played, I think that the balance is a lot better. I think that it's where it needs to be, or at least close to it. It might need to be a little bit harder, a little bit easier, depending on what class you're on. But I think on the classes that I've played, it seems to be in a much, much better spot across the board.
Okay. I'm not sure whether it's you not saying anything or whether it's TeamSpeak messing up.
No, it's me not saying anything. Can go
Okay.
ahead on to the next person.
I don't know what to trust at this point. Yeah, okay. Nothing else then? No other concerns you might have
Um, well, if you want
at
me to
this
get into
stage?
that, I do think that it might be too hard for some characters, and I really wish that they didn't do the blanket balancing, where they just made it across the board. Here's how the difficulty is changing, whether your class is actually having a hard time already or not. Which some classes they weren't having hard times, but they were, about where they needed to be. I think a couple of classes in certain trees, not in all of their trees, but in certain trees, some classes were where they need to be. With doing this blanket balancing, they've made some trees that were viable now not viable even remotely. And I think that that is a big issue. I think that overall, there's at least one tree on each class I think that is where it needs to be. I haven't played all the classes, but from what I've heard, it seems that way. Um, I wish that they wouldn't have done that. I wish they would have instead done a little bit less blanket balancing, so like change it a little bit, but not quite as far as they did, and then change individual classes, change their skill values a little bit, and experiment with that, and actually spend time to do it right, as opposed to doing this blanket balancing that just kind of affects everybody, regardless of how good or bad your class is right now.
Okay. Sorry, Pine Leaf.
So far, I have not had any troubles with any of the stuff I've been doing, but I've been mainly doing things in the stuff below the epic story where I've done it on 3 different classes already, and I have because we're Warden, the Runekeeper, and the Hunter. And all of those had absolutely no trouble in doing the epic story. I'm taking a Runekeeper through the North Downs, and the stuff seems to be about where it should be. The difficulty is about where I would think it really would be, as opposed to either being too hard or too difficult. I've not tried the Lore Master since the revamp, and I haven't done any. I have done the Burglar to a couple of skirmishes at level 95, and that seems about right. Takes a little bit longer to do a fight, but they did do some adjustments, and I did find a tier 2 run of Assault on the Ringwraith's Lair to be, let's say, challenging, but I didn't think it was inordinately so.
All
So
right.
far, what I've seen seems to be about right.
Okay. The next question is, where do you think, or where would you like it to be in the various aspects? Again, landscape, skirmishes, all that sort of stuff. Where would you maybe either for you personally, or maybe where you think that it should be for the game as a whole, where it'd be best for it to be. Where would you like it currently? And again, I suppose. Looks like a lot of choice now.
Yeah, if you forget who you've called on, then there's an issue. Where should the difficulty in LOTRO lie? That's such a tough question because everyone has a different opinion on it because it should be balanced to where everyone wants it to be. And everyone has a different idea of what's hard, what's easy, or even if they want hard or easy. I know some people absolutely do not want landscape to be hard, even remotely. They think that the stuff that gives you good gear and things like that should be hard. Landscape should be trash mobs. End of story. That's how it should be. I think that that's an interesting idea. I don't think that's where I want my game to be. I love to play on the landscape. I love the quests. I love things like that. For me personally, I think that landscape design difficulty should be about where it is right now on the champion. I think it's about where it needs to be. I think the lore masters. I don't have water lore yet, so I don't know how that changes things, but right now I think that it's close to where it needs to be. It might still be a little bit overpowered. I haven't really done that much solo stuff, so I haven't experimented with enough to know really where that needs to be. But I think at the very least it's in a better spot than it was before. I think that landscape content should be, at the end of the day, still the easiest content in the game, aside from maybe the epic story. Which I want challenged there as well. But and then you get into the harder stuff, the skirmishes, which should be the next hardest thing I think, and then the instances, which should be even harder, and then the raids and things like that should be the hardest content in LOTRO. I have no idea where to put epic battles, so don't even ask me.
It's interesting actually that you say skirmishes are the next hardest thing. I actually found that those Urukai beneath Isengard were harder than any encounter I'd fought in a solo skirmish.
Right, we're saying what we want it to be, right? Not what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I'd want it to be, where skirmishes are harder than landscape, but not as hard as instances or the things above that. And then elites are an exception. I think that there are some places on landscape where there should be, difficult areas, and I think that's what elites are for. So,
Well, I just wonder about concerning what you said about skirmishes being because there are three tiers of skirmishes.
that's true. I wasn't referring to tier 1, but I think that because tier 1 is relatively easy, especially solo. I mean, it's easier than landscape in some cases. Tier 2 and 3 is when things start to get a lot harder.
Yeah,
Tier
okay, I
3
agree with that.
is Tier 3 is definitely probably harder than a lot of the instance content, but I'm saying where I want things to be, and that's where I think that things should be. But it is nice that it does have those different difficulty levels because that allows there to be a little bit more customization.
Okay. God damn it, pauses. Pinef.
I didn't notice anything that I would disagree with that. It sounds about right because you'd want the landscape mob so that maybe some of the quest hubs could be a little bit challenging or something like that. But in general, you don't want to be forcing someone who just wants to go from one place to another to be constantly fighting a battle and having a yes, I'm 3 levels above the area and I get killed 17 times just going to the next quest hub. So there are levels at which it would be ridiculous to make things too hard on that. So yes, I would say that the stuff that's instanced should generally be harder, but you shouldn't be able to walk around everywhere with impunity either.
Yeah. There's some good chat responses if you want to read some of those, Atheros.
Yeah, sure. Well, this actually, yeah. Dialogue Musclegut says it seems better balanced now, although 3-man tier 3 skirms are quite achievable in a duo. And this is actually interesting because a couple of class builds, certain ones, Guardians in general actually, and yellow traded captains, have reportedly been able to solo skirmish raids. which not good, as you can imagine. But that's obviously more an issue with that particular class build that's being overly buffed,
Yeah, I
rather
think
than the
it's
content
Which
being too easy.
once again goes back to the blanket balancing, which I think was a huge issue. When you don't have all your classes in a relatively balanced state, for example, having some classes being able to solo tier, solo the raids, that's an issue when other classes have a hard time doing, say, a duo. I think that the discrepancy between classes was the very reason why they shouldn't have done blanket balancing, and I think that it's a big issue.
Terry Dwin says, I'm a little annoyed that landscape mobs a couple of levels below my champion, level 90 as of yesterday, are taking serious chunks out of it now, but that's probably a gear issue. She also says that I still feel like I play the least powerful class in the game, so there's that.
Mm.
Obviously, I don't play a champion, but that's where you kind of be saying that the champion feels less potent than it was
And
before Helm's Deep.
Well, even with Helm's Deep, the champion was not the most powerful class, not even amongst the top three most powerful classes, and I was very glad
Well,
about that. Well, think about it. Guardian, Captain, Lore Master were more powerful than the champion in my book. Um,
before Helm's Deep, I wouldn't say the captain was.
Maybe, but it's changed now. Um, Now, definitely those classes are more powerful than the champion, and maybe some others, I don't know, but I know for a fact that those three seem to be reported to be very overpowered. On my champion, I really like where it is right now. It's maybe a little bit too hard in some places, a little too easy in others. I haven't tried out all the trees. I am running Yellow Line, which it was before Helm's Deep the most powerful class, or the most powerful line. I don't know how it is now, but I'm overall really happy with it. It's honestly harder than what it was before Helm's Deep by quite a bit. It's harder than it has been the entire time I've known my champion, to be honest. And I'm glad about that because I feel like the champion had been constantly overpowered until Helm's Deep when it wasn't the most overpowered class, but that's because everyone was overpowered. And then now I think it's at a spot where I can really appreciate what each skill does and actually have to think in combat to really be a champion. You have to work hard at it. That's not the right kind of balance for everyone, and I understand that. But for me, I really like where it is right now.
God damn it. Okay, iLog also says that landscape should be approachable for all players, but not so easy as to be boring. Tier 1 instances and skirmishes should be medium, and then Tier 2 or challenge modes more challenging, which seems like the standard or what it should be. It's not always like that, as we've discussed, but that seems like the ideal setup.
Yep.
For me, it's my experience on my Lore Master with Update 13 is I'm still, at no point do I feel like I'm actually in danger of dying. Because I have Water Law, that one skill, I do not at any point come close to dying. I've actually needed to use it now, which is way different from Helm's Deep, where I just basically used it when I felt like it, or if I just needed to regen a bit faster. Now, if I don't use it in like fights with 2 or 3 mobs, I actually start getting pretty low.
Well, that's good news.
Which is a problem, because if I didn't have Water Law, if they nerfed it, I would actually be in a better state. Although the issue is before Helm's Deep or before Rise of Rohan, when they gave us Water Law, I would have needed to rely on my flanks to give healing, and they nerfed those with Helm's Deep to make them pretty much useless. They actually heal less than a single tick of Water Law, so they would need to buff that if they were going to make those kind of like changes, balancing that you were talking about. They would need to. That's something they would need to change.
Yeah.
Because honestly, to me, the flank system is a great system, and it felt smooth, and it felt like something a Lore Master would do rather than just hitting a skill every few seconds just to never ever come close to dying.
Yeah. Yep. And it made sense because, if you have somebody flanking something, your morale is going to increase. You're going to be more excited because it took an enemy off guard, and so that would make your relative morale be much higher. So it makes complete sense from a gameplay point of view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question is when you do get people complaining about difficulty or finding it too hard, too easy, how do you distinguish between the content they are doing being the issue, or the player who is doing the content being the issue?
That's a tough question. I'm assuming we're still going in the same order since I'm already talking.
Yeah, since
Um,
Planif needs time.
um, well, I think that the player is never the issue to an extent. Um, I think in general, their complaints should be taken seriously whether they're the worst player or the best player, because if Lotro has, 1,000 players that are worse than, anybody else out there, then they should be taken very seriously on their kind of thing, because that's a fairly, well, I don't know if 1,000 players, but some type of portion that would be a large portion of the player base. Um, they should be taken seriously. I think that the majority should have it to an extent. I don't think that if the majority is someone that wants the content to be harder than what a normal game would have, that could be an issue as well. But I think that the player, telling the difference between the player and the normal difficulty actual is a hard thing, and that's where you get into the issue of having a single difficulty, which is another reason why I think that the landscape content should be the easiest content in LOTRO, but it shouldn't be necessarily easy all the time. I think that the elites should be the things that are really providing the challenge, where you're like, oh wow, I barely made it out of that fight alive. That was really hard. The normal landscape guys, I think, should be easier. One thing I do like about Star Wars The Old Republic is they have groups of enemies, and that allows you to feel a lot more heroic without actually being that way, because they have the 3 enemies have the same amount of health as one enemy would in Lotro, basically. And so I kind of wish that they would have set up their combat system like that from the beginning, because it does make you feel a little bit more heroic, but at the same time it devalues the power of the enemy. So I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to distinguish actual difficulty and the player, and I think you have to just look at the majority and look at that. I don't think that it can be an individual basis, because then you're deciding if someone's a good player or not, and I don't think that any game should have to do that to a player. That's just my opinion, but I think that there should still be a challenge, just not make it be really hard. And I think that if you play a lot of games and you look at the difficulty in those, that's normal difficulty, particularly MMOs, and then you look at, say, LOTRO, and you look at the difference between the two, I think that the easy difficulty is usually what landscape is given, and I think that it might be a little bit too hard right now for some classes in LOTRO, just because of the industry standard. I think for difficulty is what you need to look at more, maybe, unless your player base is crying out enough that no, we don't want the industry standard, which a lot of people have been complaining that the industry overall is too easy and MMOs aren't hard anymore, which I think is why ESO, a portion of why ESO is doing well, is because it actually has hard gameplay for once. So I mean, it's a tough argument, and there really isn't a right answer. I think that it's almost impossible to decide overall exactly where difficulty could be, but I think that as long as you have a general idea as a game designer of where you want the difficulty, the players will come and they'll decide where it is. But then changing difficulty is an issue, I think. And it's hard. This update made it be very hard, and they're almost in a no-win situation with certain groups of players because of the way that they're doing things. So I don't know. It's tough.
The Old Republic method you described earlier is actually something I probably should have said in the what I would have liked, because that actually is a system I do really like. I think it would actually even better in Lotro than it would in the Old Republic, because here you're meant to have these enemies, orcs and goblins, that in the lore meant to be less powerful than a
Exactly.
human or an elf or a dwarf or even a hobbit. So having those like grouped up, and it would make each fight, each engagement more exciting for me.
It would quite a bit, I think, and it could pose an issue for, say, something like a burglar, but they could also be designed in such a way to where they affect the entire unit, as opposed to, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it would take a whole complete combat redesign, but I think that it would
There
be
is, yeah,
something interesting.
There are a
yeah.
few cases of this in West Rohan. I recall there is a place with the half orcs where you have a half orc like walking around, then you have two
Yeah.
ones he is linked to. So if you pull any one of those, all three of them go at you.
And
That's
those
it. Two of them
those are really
forms.
cool designs, but it also does make it hard for like the burglar, for example, and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, one of the more interesting mobs is in Ivendim, where you run into the goblins, where you have these pack of four greenies.
Oh, the boggarts.
Yeah, the boggarts,
Yes, yes, that's a good one too. Um,
brothers of
let's see.
destruction.
Yeah. The something I would like to clarify about which one being the issue or the problem. I mean, some cases if a player is like say finding something a certain quest or certain quest line or certain zone to be too difficult. I mean, you can find ways of making it easier for themselves, like say their gear, maybe checking their gear or checking their traits, or maybe even just trying a different method using different skills or using skills they haven't used before. It's that sort of thing you can say, but obviously it's hard. Like I think Krell was saying in the chat, it's how do you make it easier for the player to tell that the problem is that they're not using certain skills or that their gear isn't quite good enough.
Well, I
How
think you leave the difficulty here long enough and they'll start looking for skills or they'll quit. And that's
Right.
the key, is you have to make it easy enough to where they won't quit, but hard enough to where they will learn how to use their class if they're having trouble as a player. And that becomes really hard because from the start, designing difficulty is easier. Changing difficulty when players have gone 95 levels is much harder, especially when you went from something really, really easy to something that for some classes is harder than it's ever been before. And that is very risky territory, I think. For the
really this
champion,
kind of problem,
it's harder than it's ever been before, so I think it's really
this
risky.
problem cropped up with Helm's Deep, really making it snapping to that ridiculously easy,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming back to something like I wouldn't say this is a polar extreme for how easy Helm's Deep was, but because it was so easy before and now it's being brought back that the other way, it does make a fairly large gap.
Yeah,
which is probably
it's
why
not.
people are struggling so
Yeah,
much.
I will agree that it's not as hard as it was easy beforehand. It's not that far in the other swing of things, but it is a lot harder. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, one example I know of is that when you were concerning Helm's Deep area, is that one player, in considering on the complaints about difficulty, is one person happened to be right at the point of the transition to update 13 to be right at the toughest instance that there was in Helm's Deep. And then the update 13 put on, and then they started this instance, and they're thinking, "Oh my goodness gracious!" They thought that the
Hmm.
entirety of update 13 was this difficult, even though they were doing the hardest instance that was in Helm's Deep. With the changes put on top of to make it more difficulty, and fortunately, I com I did some dual skirmishes with the person in order to demonstrate so that we could see how difficult the range really was, so they could see some other content first before going into what was the most difficult instance.
Which is an unfortunate happening, really. And it's not something that would happen with most people, but it's just really bad luck that it's you go in as the hardest of all West Rohan, and
Yeah.
then the update comes along. It's not a good thing to happen.
It's not a good thing to happen.
Something I actually would like to mention about um, content being the problem versus beer is also it goes the other way in terms of people finding it too easy. So say you're a champion, you're going through content, you just find things so easy that you're just not enjoying it anymore. There are some methods of making it harder for yourself. Obviously, taking off gear is an option, but a lot of people don't like to do that because, say, I put work into getting this gear, why shouldn't I be able to use it? I find that some people tend to just stick with the normal method of questing a LOTRO, which is pull a single mob at a time. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you've done the quest. You could try a different method of, say, pulling 2, 3, 4, 5 or more at once. That can provide a challenge. Or you could, say, do quests 3, 4 levels above you. These things like that where the finding things necessarily too easy, but there is also ways of making it harder for yourself.
Yeah.
So to
The
an extent
trouble,
that
yeah, I don't like doing quests 3 or 4 levels above me because if you keep on doing that, you're going to run out of content before you reach cap. And so therefore I try to avoid doing quests above my level as much as possible for that reason. Because you always see these complaints about people saying, "Oh, there's not enough content here." Yeah, because you're constantly doing quests 5 levels above you. Of course, you're going to run out of quests 5 levels early.
With Riders of Rohan, though, that was a little different. Because then they
Yeah.
actually did have an issue. But yeah, in general, I agree.
yeah.
So therefore, I do avoid doing quests so far above me for that reason.
Yeah, and
And yeah,
there's a point a few people in our chat are actually making that this is a lot easier in single player games because in those, like say Skyrim, you tend to be given toggles to make things easier or harder for yourself. You just hit that toggle and there you go. It's easier or harder. With
right.
MMOs, it's a lot harder to do. They have done certain things like the Elf Inspiration Stones for the Epic Story, where you can use that and just make it a lot easier for yourself. Or you
Yeah, but
could not use
that's
them.
the Elfstone is. I mean, come on. That in most cases, that's from making it be a six-man impossibility for some classes and changing it to be a
I'm
doable thing. In
Too
most cases.
easy.
Yeah, and most of them. There are like a few. I think the Troll Shores ones where you go in the caves with all the elite trolls in them. Those were actually, well, at least before update 13, those were quite easily soloable for
with
most people, I would say.
with
Not everyone,
Helm's Deep
because
balancing, but before Helm's Deep, that wasn't even really the case for a lot of classes.
Oh no, I
Like, for
could never
example,
solo
Loremaster
those.
before Helm's Deep could not do that, at least from what I've heard from Mist and some other people.
okay.
But that
Is
is true.
there anything else to say on this question?
Well,
The
I
chat
do
room
have.
seems to be giving a lot of comments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's kind of hard to keep up with
One
actually.
comment on something that Andang had said, and that is he was saying how ESO is more difficult than some of the more recent games, and even in that game, I have seen posts where people have claimed that the quests are too easy there
Oh
because there's
yeah,
always someone who says it's too easy.
is an amazing number of people that have been sending emails to Quest Gaming Network and various other places saying that the difficulty is still too easy. So I think that no matter what, you're not going to be able to win with this thing,
Yeah.
with everyone. But if you win with, say, 1 million players or however many Elder Scrolls Online has now, that's a big, big win. And you need to get your difficulty in a decent spot where you can get not everyone that tries your game to like the difficulty, but the majority of players that are either there or going to be there need to be able to like where the difficulty is.
Here's actually an interesting one I didn't think about. Is Terry Dwin saying talking about the Aoth platforming quests, which are rather non-standard from the ones we usually with combat, where you can always upgrade your gear to survive more and kill the mobs easier. These ones you're always gonna do the same thing, and you can't like come back later when you're more powerful to do it. How do you balance those? Make them like easy enough for the majority to do without making it completely easy.
It's tough. You just have to test on beta and hope that you get enough feedback to understand what most players think and hope that the beta population is most players. Which it could be that the difficulty was too hard because they didn't have the launcher there to get a better sample of the player base. It was only the players that were wanting to keep that beta client on for 5 months or however long it's been since they previously got on beta. And that's, that could be part of the reason why the balance was how it was, because I know a lot of people uninstall the client between updates and things like that. I keep it on all the time because I know every single time the beta client's up, I'm going to be on testing. But I know a lot of people are a little bit more casual, and they, don't reserve that space on their hard drive. So I don't know. That might be part of the reason why difficulty was harder for some classes.
Hmm.
But that's obviously way into the theory territory.
Yeah. Here we have a question by Krell, and it's actually relating to something we did discuss earlier today. It's about how long is too long to make sweeping difficulty changes like in Update 13 after they've changed the system, the whole class system. How long is too long to do that, if at all?
Too long to wait, or...
Yeah.
Okay. I think that more than... In this case, they should have, within 2 months, given something. Some type of change. If across the board, so many players were telling them that it's too easy, they could, in my mind, you can make a value change across the board of something like this by decreasing the mitigations, for example, fairly quickly. They could have done that, I think, early on. And spending 5 months, I think that they could have come up with a better balancing solution than this blanket balancing. I could be wrong. They might have something planned following this up, and they might already be working on it. I don't know. But it just seems like it took a long time, a really long time, to get this balance in place. And before that, we found out that they were fixing balance, or getting a lot closer to where it needs to be, or however you want to view it. Before we found that they were changing the balance with Update 13, I was honestly thinking about ending LOTRO because it was way too easy for my champion, and it had been easy before Helm's Deep on my champion, and it had been easy for so long on my champion that I was just tired of it, and I was hoping that the class changes would add in interesting dynamics, which they might have. I'm still experimenting, but they did way decrease the difficulty with not that much more depth on the champion, and so that was a big issue for me because it got a whole lot easier, and the my skills number decreased and things like that, and it just overall made it be too simple. And I think that that was a mistake for 5 months, having it be that easy. I think they should have made it be a higher priority above some of the bugs when that much of the player base is reporting that kind of an issue.
So, what do you think, if there are any particular reasons regarding the actual content, what do you think made it take so long to get this heavy stuff instead of the, if you recall, some of the 0.1, 0.2 patches did have small adjustments to difficulty. As Crow points out in the chat, 12.1 had something like mobs using stronger attacks more often or hitting more quickly. Those sort of things. What do you think took them so long to get this major set of changes in?
My only thought is that they didn't realize that the difficulty was so out of whack. I think they legitimately thought that those would fix the difficulty because I don't think they realized how far out the difficulty was. I think they realized it for some classes, but I don't think they realized across the board that every single class, for the most part, thought it was too easy on at least one tree.
Okay. Punny, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay then. The last question, or at least unless I think of another one, is when the need calls for it, where exactly do you make adjustments versus the, say, player classes versus the environment? Or how much to either one do you make? Because the thing I find is that even if a player class is powerful or too powerful, even making nerfs to it, people do not like it at all. So precisely where should they make it to ideally keep as many people happy as possible?
Well,
That's a question.
It is.
um, when the need calls for it, precisely where should the adjustment be made? Oh, can you clarify that a little bit more? What exactly you're getting at? I
To
guess.
say,
well, it
so
sounds
like
like to me it comes down to a question: is it a relative problem or is it an absolute problem? Meaning, if there's only one class that's really out of whack, it's a completely different answer than if every single class was equally well above the environment.
And that's
well,
why I think they needed this blanket balancing because every class was reporting that they were overpowered, and so that's why they needed to do it this time. And I think that that's why they didn't make so big of changes in the beginning because they didn't really realize what problem they had. Which I don't know if that speaks more towards the I don't want to say a lack of listening, but maybe a lack of I don't know if
foresight,
turbine
maybe.
maybe foresight or just not realizing where things were before and how different the class changes made the difficulty be. Or if this, I mean, they still haven't told us if this was. Have they said if the difficulty was intentional or a mistake yet? I don't think they have.
Mm.
And so my question is, was the difficulty intentional, where they wanted to make it be easier for players, maybe not as easy as they made it, where they wanted to make it be easier for players so they could get to learn their class, or if they wanted to make it, or if it was just, a mistake and it accidentally became that overpowered.
It's a question, and I don't think we're ever going to find a proper
Oh,
answer to that.
I don't think we will unless they come out like a year from now saying that they finally got it to where they wanted or something like that. Somehow
Mm.
leaking it, but I doubt it. Um,
On the question, because I know you wanted a bit more clarification on that.
mhm.
You'll find that players, especially with certain classes, I find they've been changed a lot in a short space of time. Wardens, in particular, seem to have this issue. Even if adjustments have to be made, they don't like changing it being changed too much. They would rather you say adjust the content, make mobs more difficult. It's a question of, like Piney was saying, is if a certain class is found to be more powerful, do you still just go ahead and change it no matter how much people don't like it?
I think if it's legitimately a, I mean, honestly, if the developers would just play the game, I don't think it would be that hard to realize that the difficulty was way too easy. I'm not saying that they don't play the game. I'm not saying that there weren't, developers that were crying for the difficulty to be changed. I'm not saying that they didn't change it as quick as they could have. But I mean, it seems kind of weird that for 5 months going by and no difficulty change of the scale needed happened.
Mm.
It seems very weird to me that for 5 months, I mean, maybe they had it ready, 3 months ago and wanted to throw it in with this update, but why? Why not get it out to your players sooner then? And obviously that's, I don't know when they had it available, but I don't know how it can take this long to get that difficulty changed when it was this big of an issue in the community. When we talked on our Helm's Deep review episode, the number one issue was difficulty by far. And in the chat, in the emails, in everything, difficulty was the number one issue in our community by far. Nothing came close. And on the forums, it was difficulty. Everywhere it was difficulty. I don't know how it got overlooked, or maybe it didn't get overlooked and it took that long to happen, but it shouldn't take that long to get difficulty to happen, changes for difficulty to happen. So I don't
Commit
know what
something
went
to a
on.
committee.
I
Krell actually was saying something in chat about the thing you were talking about. Maybe they intended for it to be that easy,
and that's
to
the
allow
only
people to get used to
thing.
it. And he's guessing that maybe we just had too much time to get used to it, that we got so used to it that we just didn't enjoy it anymore, and that's what led to this. people finding it too far.
Exactly. I completely agree with that, but I think that and maybe it's because I've thought it's been way too easy since Helm's Deep beta. I've been complaining about the difficulty. Now with I think it was like update 4 or something, or the fourth version of the beta, it was actually too hard on the champion. They finally got it to where it was too hard, and it was actually balanced really, really nicely. It wasn't too hard, I'm sorry. It was actually balanced really nicely, and the difficulty was where it needed to be. The skills were where they needed to be, and then with update 5, they made it be a lot easier. And so, making that kind of a change, I don't know if players asked for it to be easier, or if Turbine made it be easier. But it was definitely a change, a very noticeable change that happened on the champion. And then again, when it came out with Helm's Deep, it was even easier than it was there. So, I don't know. But I mean, regardless of what it was, I don't think that you should spend 5 months getting players used to the difficulty. I mean, here's the thing. If they were trying to get players used to the difficulty, I think that they would have made a gradual change with 12.1, a gradual change with 12.2, a gradual change with 12.3, which they kind of did, but it was nowhere near as big of a jump that we now see with Update 13. And so if they were trying to ease players into it, wouldn't it make more sense to have like a 13 happen, or something between that and 13 happen like say a month or two ago? It doesn't make any sense to me why, if you were trying to make it be easy to let players get used to the class, to then change it to be this difficult, which it's actually about where it needs to be on the champion, but to change it that much, why? That doesn't make any sense.
I think
they were. I got the impression that they were afraid of doing their changes too fast after the update, so that they wouldn't have time to analyze it. Though, just say to most players, it seemed to be more obvious.
Right, but then, like, it doesn't make any sense then if they were doing that, then why make this huge change now? If you had that type of doubt, and if it was actually that easy, like, why? It doesn't make any sense.
All right. I think we've covered this enough. I think we should go on.
The thing, I just want to make a final point. The thing I found with the difficulty is that these changes have made it harder than even doing Rise of Rohan, because that was where I first found it becoming very easy. Rise of Isengard, I think that was pretty tough actually. Some of those mobs hit very hard. Some are even immune to crowd control, which is torture for a lore master. And more importantly, the gear wasn't giving you everything you need in all one package. These changes are probably even before that, which makes me wonder if maybe this just pushed it over the edge, and they think that even they were having hints that even before that it was too easy, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
I don't know, but do we all agree that it wasn't handled as good as it could have been? Or is that too much of a statement?
This isn't the ideal situation to be in, but given the circumstances of what they had already put themselves in with Helm's Deep, I think this update is a net positive.
I think it is a net positive, but I don't know if it's going to be... I think it'll still be received as a net positive as well. But at the same time, I don't know. It seems very weird. I don't understand why they did it this way.
All right. If you want to move on now, Pineave.
All right, we'll move on. All right, we'll go on to donations. A big thanks to Stuart for a $10 or more donation to LOTRO players. Hope you guys are well. Just wanted to say, please keep up the good work. If you would like to help LOTRO players, you could simply go to the donations page where you can help support the podcast on LOTRO players and also help support the site. You have $5 and $10 mentions where you can donate and get a mention on one or all of our active podcasts for an episode depending on the amount. For $5, you get a mention on the podcast of your choice. For $10 or more, you get a mention on all of our active podcasts. And as for our feedback, we do not have any iTunes reviews, but we do have some comments. And we'll begin with AppleJackSoft24, who left a comment on his reaction video to the producer's letter. Oh, on the reaction video to the producer's letter. LOTRO is in its seventh year, and they have just now made it through Helm's Deep and the flooding of Isengard. With these more substantial and more frequent updates in place, it would seem to me that this is their way of speeding along the content. I'm not one to be all doom and gloom, but this says that they are really want to end the story sooner than later and be done with the whole thing. And Andang, you have a reply to that?
Yeah, I replied to it on YouTube, and I basically said that I don't really know if that's exactly the case. I mean, from what I remember from the books, there seems to be large swaths of land where there's not that much going on. Mostly because I think Gondor has a lot better protection of its borders than Rohan does. Obviously, like that's not even arguable. Gondor has better protection of its borders than Rohan does. Mostly because they were actually fighting against the enemy. Um, and so I think that there could be a whole lot of nothing in the large areas of Gondor, or Turbine would have to take creative license to create conflict in places that there might not have been in the books, or it might not have been mentioned whether there was or not. I think that because of their plan, they almost have to be doing this jump from place to place, and with these teleports like we talked about in between. And so I think that they are touching on the places that are, or actually, spending time going really in depth on the places that have the conflict in Gondor. I mean, they're still spending 2 years at least on Gondor, maybe more. That's a lot of time. I don't see that as a highlight, in my opinion at least.
Yes. And there is another point is that the developers are on record saying, I can't remember whether it was a developer or if it was Rowan, who mentioned that some of them are really looking forward to creating content of post-Ring destruction, areas that aren't described too well by Tolkien, and having the freedom of doing some things that aren't as bound by what's already written.
Wait.
So, in other words, some fourth age stuff also. So some of them are looking forward to that also, but that's in it. But as I said, as Andang said, I should say, is that 2 years in Gondor isn't exactly a quick flight. I mean, they spent 2 years in Rohan and 2 years in Gondor,
Yeah, and
and
that
actually
doesn't
probably
even
three because we'd have Ithilien and stuff like that in the future
exactly, and
also.
that doesn't even include the amount of time that we might spend in conflict with Mordor and things like that. We don't know what their plans are with Mordor because really we're not supposed to be going anywhere near Mordor. So I don't know how in the world they're going to handle that. But it will be interesting to see if we actually do go inside Mordor or not. And particularly when we do. I mean, there's a time when we could be going into Mordor, which would be, right after the events of Frodo and Sam. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
We still think that I have a feeling that there are many who are of the opinion that that Shelob's lair will be a raid at some point in the future.
If by many you mean Pineleaf and his followers, then yes.
The the way I see this is, I know they've kind of said this I think Rowan said this a couple of times, is that they are focusing their resources more towards this development of the story. And obviously, to require development of the story, you need development of the landscape. I don't have no evidence to back this up, of course, but I kind of got the sense that Turbine has, or at least less resources for Lotro than they've had in previous years, and that in combination with this change of focus, where they're going dedicated towards firstly revamping old things, making them better, which we've seen with this update. There's a lot of things that they've changed to be more enjoyable. The mail system, the inventory, the 3 zone revamps. They've kind of focused more towards that and adding more landscape. Because they're focusing more on that stuff, they're able to produce more of it more quickly, which is kind of what we're getting the sense of with these producers that are adding more landscape content, I should say, more quickly than they used to, and obviously at the cost of certain things like traditional instance content and raids.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you think that let me see how to phrase this right. Do you think that there is enough content that they could make in Gondor to really justify spending more than 2 years in the parts that they mentioned?
It's a tough question. I don't really know, to be honest.
I don't either, and part of me wonders if they meant to spend that long in Rohan, and if they might have regretted spending that long in Rohan. I don't know. I know that a lot of players, well, I don't want to say a lot of players, but I know that some people, like Mist, for example, she's tired of being in Rohan, and she was only through the first half of it.
Yeah.
I think ideally for them, they would have liked to have avoided having to do Wildemore, because I think a lot of them points to that being a kind of this is buying time while we build West Rohan story and quests.
Mm-hmm.
If they had managed to get West Rohan out earlier and avoid having to put that in, I think that would have sped up a lot of time, and we would probably right now be in Gondor already.
Yes, but I don't know, because I don't know if the epic story was, the epic story might have been already written that way. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, ideally, I don't think Wildemore was entirely necessary.
It wasn't
Really?
necessary, but I think that they meant to do it, and I think that it was. I don't think that it was an afterthought. It seemed like one of the most polished areas that they've had in Rohan.
Yeah, I think like they decided from a while back that they just didn't have the time, or they would leave. There would be a large gap between East and West Rohan, and that's what they decided to put there. I don't think this was like a snap judgment call or anything. I just don't think
Well,
this
they
was
could have
a
just
ideal
saved.
situation for them.
Right, but they could have just saved a part of an expansion and just done it that way. And either way, they were going to have a fill-in zone, and it didn't have to be Wildermore necessarily. I think that they genuinely wanted to go to Wildermore and experience, because they had Rohan fairly mapped out. Wildermore was their chance to be creative, and I think that Turbine needs a zone a year to be creative. Otherwise, I think they've kind of fallen into a pit a little
Right.
bit.
So sometimes I do still feel it's a stretch to say where I don't know, I always feel like Baltimore. Their thing that bugs me about it is that they're saying how it's feels like it's eternally winter. I'm sorry, it's February. Of course it's cold. It's the first thing that goes through my mind.
That's true, but at the same time, I mean, the thing is that Rohan, they needed something to break up the two halves, I think.
Yeah, I know.
And
It's just
that
like a
is
weird
their breather from, so that you're not constantly for 2 years in exactly the same. I mean, they did a great job diversifying and all that stuff, but the same culture, the same general feel of an area, and I think that they wanted to break that up, and justly so. I think that Wildermore made me have a lot higher opinion of Western Rohan because it was a
All right.
break.
I think we need to
Going-
continue.
I just want to make a final point, going back to the original question of whether we spent too much time in Rohan or whether Rohirrim culture. I think for me, it's ended about where it needed to. I'm not
Yeah.
sick of it, but I'm happy that we're finally done.
I agree, but I think when you go to another man zone of Gondor, and if it could still, I don't want to say feel like Rohan, but it could, because we've gone through Rohan, have a much greater effect if we spent even more time in Gondor. But I don't know.
I think they're going to make it diverse enough. I have faith in that.
Oh, I
Right.
have no doubt, but there's only so much you can do before it feels before it hangs on you a little bit, kind of like Moria rather is a very diverse zone, but it does get really really old.
Oh yes, it does.
All right. Amber Flower left a comment in response to the producer's letter. I would like to point out that I totally called Bjornings. Totally!
Yeah, yeah.
That said, I am not sure if I care to play one.
Hmm.
But anyway, I'm still trying to level original classes. Looks like a lot of things coming this year. I guess I should keep saving my TP. And so he totally called Bjornings, and I guess I can't say that I'll never play one, seeing that I'm playing a druid on DDO.
Now we know why you subbed to DDO. You're just wanting to get a head start on the Bjorning class finally. We all know why you're subbed to DDO now this week. It's that Bjorning class. We know now. Your secret's out.
Well, I've been playing a druid on DDO for a while, so
Well, here's a question I have for everyone. Are you going to play a Bjorning? Yes or no? Pineleaf.
I play every class.
Okay. So that's a yes. Thelros.
Probably. I would like to hear more about the details of how it works
Yeah.
before I make a firm judgment, but I will probably at least give it a try.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Pineleaf.
I'll level one up to cap. Now the question is
Wow.
whether I do something ridiculous like what I do with wardens or not will depend on. I mean, if it's a great class that grabs me, I might have as many of them as I have wardens.
It would be
Otherwise,
very
it'll be
impressive,
one.
Pineleaf, if you had more Bjornings than Wardens. That would be the day, I tell you.
Pineleaf, Beyonding Master of Middle-earth.
That would be impressive. And deleting Wardens does not count, Pineleaf.
Oh, don't worry, I've got 17 slots per server.
Yes, 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 yes. That's crazy. I think that I'm gonna wait like Atharos to hear a little bit more about it, but I think that as long as it's different enough from the existing classes, I will be interested to try it out for sure. All right.
Yeah.
Continue on,
Very,
Ben.
very well, you ready?
Yes.
All right, David T. left a comment in response to the zone revamp in the developer diary. From the dev diary on the zone revamps, 7. All quest hubs are open. Completionists will still get recommendations on where to go when they finish a batch of contents, but explorers can ditch Trestle Bridge halfway through and pick up at the beginning of Mention, if that's what you want. Thank you for not gating quest contents with linear sequencing. Hopefully this applies to all 3 zones revamped, and maybe it can be done in other zones such as Wildemore, etc.
Okay.
I find it
Right?
interesting that he brings up Wildermore because that's one of the zones where the fact that I think that it's almost too open because because of the way that the epic ties in with the quest, you can actually have a certain someone defeated before you finish the other parts of the quests where he's not yet defeated, and that can create a big issue,
Yeah.
as you can imagine.
Yeah, that was a conflict between how the epic story ran and how the storyline for the area ran. But I believe that while they were independent with each other, that each of the 2 lines were dependent on the finishing the quest before it, which is I
Yeah.
think what his complaint was.
I think that the main reason why Wildermore has this kind of requirement is because the story
Yeah, it's a strong storyline.
it's a strong storyline in the actual zone, and I would rather have the strong storyline than the quests allowing you to start at any point.
Yeah, this is really the previous method they've done, which is they've made it a lot more linear than it was. If you remember, like the old system, which is quest hub, you pick up a bunch of quests, you do them, and then you go on to the next hub, which could actually be independent of the ones you'd already done. The downside of that is obviously the story theme is a lot less strong because of it. Whereas with the new system, it's stronger, but you don't have as much freedom to choose which quest you want to do and which ones you don't. Personally, I liken this system they're describing now. It's kind of similar to Evandim and the Great River, where you can go to a hub, start the quest there, and if you find like get to a point where you don't want to do it, then you can just stop there and go to the next hub and pick up from there. That sounds like the ideal setup to me.
In that case, usually you have your hubs have their own individual stories that might have a common theme that makes up the zone, rather than one story that covers the entire zone.
Yeah.
All right. Emails. We did not have any emails this week, but if you would like to email us, you could email us at lotraplayers.mymiddleearth@gmail.com, and you could also follow us on Twitter. Lotro at Lotro Andang at PVMP underscore Andang, Braxwolf at Braxwolf, Draculetta at Draculetta underscore 72, Etheros at Etheros, Lilykate at Lilykate Buggins, Mystery at Mystery XOX, and that's IXOX at the end, and Pineleaf at Pineleaf Needles. And yes, despite the fact that we finished the show with only three of us, most of those people do actually exist.
But they're slowly being killed off by the lag of the internet.
Yes, and you can join us live, assuming the lag of the internet did not kill our connection at some point during
Believe it
this
or not, I
broadcast.
think it was actually good the whole time.
Oh, right, good. You could follow us on Lotro Players Adventures, which goes live every Saturday at 5 p.m. server time. You can also follow us on Lotro Players News, which goes live every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. server time, and that is United States Eastern Time. And you can join us by going to lotroplayers.com/live, and be sure to join us on the YouTube chat.
And in
And
it and
thank
all over it.
Right.
Anyway.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And everyone, please remember to skirmish responsibly.